I still remember when my marriage was full of passion and connection. After 7 years together, my wife Amanda suddenly declared, "Not tonight, or any night." This devastating rejection became a pattern, leaving me confused and hurt. Initially hoping it was temporary, I tried everything to rekindle our connection. When nothing worked, I made a decision to redirect my time, attention, and resources toward myself, never expecting how this would transform my life and ultimately save my marriage in an unexpected way. Before I dive into how my world turned upside down, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and hit that like button if you have ever felt taken for granted in a relationship. I met Amanda during a friend's wedding 8 years ago. From across the reception hall, our eyes locked, and I felt an immediate connection that I had never experienced before. She had this captivating smile that made the crowded room disappear. After gathering my courage, I introduced myself, and we spent the entire evening talking as if we had known each other for years. By the end of the night, I knew there was something special between us. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, I had proposed under the stars at Malibu Beach, and within a year, we were married in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. The first few years of our marriage were everything I had dreamed of. We traveled together, supported each other's careers, and spent lazy Sunday mornings making breakfast and planning our future. Our physical intimacy was passionate and frequent, a natural expression of the deep emotional connection we shared. But around our third anniversary, I started noticing subtle changes in Amanda's behavior. She began working later at her marketing firm, often coming home exhausted with barely enough energy to eat the dinner I had prepared before heading to bed. The kisses goodbye in the morning grew shorter, and the spontaneous hugs when she got home became less frequent. At first, I attributed it to work stress and gave her space, hoping things would return to normal once her big project was completed. Her project finished, but the distance remained. I began planning special date nights to reconnect, but she would often be distracted, checking her phone or steering conversations towards surface-level topics like household chores or bills. I surprised her with gifts, little things I knew she loved, like her favorite chocolates or a first-edition copy of her favorite childhood book. Her reactions were appreciative but lukewarm, nothing like the excited woman who had once jumped into my arms after I surprised her with concert tickets. I started cooking her favorite meals, hoping to spark something through her love of food, but she would often eat quickly or claim she had already grabbed something at the office. I began to feel like a roommate rather than a husband, and the absence of physical intimacy became increasingly noticeable. Then came our fifth anniversary. I had spent weeks planning a special evening, leaving work early to prepare her favorite meal, decorating our dining room with photos from our happiest moments together, and even hiring a string quartet to play during dinner, recreating the music from our first dance. I had bought her a bracelet she had admired months ago, hoping to see that spark in her eyes again. Amanda arrived home an hour late, apologizing half-heartedly about a meeting that ran long. She barely looked at the decorations, ate only a few bites of the meal, and seemed annoyed by the musicians rather than touched by the gesture. When they left, and I tried to lead her to the bedroom gently, kissing her neck the way she once loved, she pulled away sharply. "Not tonight, Maxwell," she said coldly, before adding the words that would echo in my mind for months to come, and honestly, not any night. I just do not feel that way anymore. I stood there, stunned and humiliated as she walked past me to the guest bedroom. The next morning, I tried to talk to her about what was wrong, what had changed, what I could do differently. Her answers were vague and dismissive. "I just do not feel it anymore," she said with a shrug. "Maybe we have grown apart. People change. But we can work on this," I insisted. "Couples go through phases. We can see a counselor, take a vacation, figure out how to reconnect." She agreed half-heartedly to think about counseling, but never followed through. When I brought up the topic again, she would get irritated or find an excuse to leave the room. I entered a period of denial. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that every marriage faced challenges. I worked even harder to please Amanda, becoming increasingly desperate for any sign of approval or affection. I took on more household responsibilities, trying to ease her stress. I stopped bringing up our lack of intimacy, hoping that removing the pressure would help her feelings return naturally. The physical and emotional toll was significant. I gained 40 pounds from stress eating, particularly late at night, when I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong. My confidence eroded, and anxiety became my constant companion. Friends commented that I seemed different, less jovial, more subdued. I stopped playing basketball with my weekly group, too exhausted from trying to save my marriage to engage in activities I once enjoyed. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the man I had become, someone whose entire self-worth had become tied to the approval of a woman who seemed increasingly indifferent to my existence. My awakening came 6 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Amanda was in her home office with the door partially open. I was bringing her a cup of tea, hoping for even a small smile of appreciation when I overheard her on the phone with her friend Jessica. "No, he still has no idea," she was saying, followed by a laugh I had not heard directed at me in months. "I swear I have him trained like a puppy. He keeps trying and I keep moving the goalposts." Another laugh. "I know I should probably just tell him, but honestly, the mortgage is nearly paid off and divorce is expensive. Besides, I am just not attracted to him anymore. You should see how much weight he has gained." I stood there, tea growing cold in my hands as my world collapsed around me. This was not a phase or a rough patch. My wife was not confused or stressed. She was deliberately manipulating me while discussing our most intimate problems with her friends. The humiliation burned through me, followed by a wave of anger I had never felt before. I did not confront her that night. Instead, I placed the tea by the door and went for a long drive trying to process what I had heard. I drove aimlessly for hours, eventually finding myself at a scenic overlook where Amanda and I had once watched a meteor shower early in our relationship. I sat there until sunrise, thinking about how completely I had lost myself in trying to fix something that Amanda had no interest in repairing. When I returned home, Amanda was already gone for work, leaving a note about a business dinner that would keep her out late. For the first time, I felt relief rather than disappointment at her absence. It gave me time to think. That afternoon, I called my old friend Daniel, someone I had neglected in my desperate attempts to focus on my marriage. To his credit, he did not scold me for the months of unanswered texts, but listened patiently as I explained my situation. "Maxwell, from what you are telling me, you have been pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom," he said bluntly. "You need to figure out if the bucket can be fixed, but more importantly, you need to stop emptying yourself trying to fill it." His words hit me hard. I spent the next few weeks reading relationship books and finally made an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Klein, who specialized in emotional neglect in marriages. In our sessions, she helped me recognize patterns I had been blind to, how my increasing efforts had been matched by Amanda's increasing withdrawal, creating a dysfunctional cycle. "What do you want, Maxwell, doctor?" Klein asked me in our third session. "I want my marriage back," I replied automatically. "No. What do you want for yourself, independent of Amanda or your marriage?" The question stumped me. I had been so focused on saving my relationship that I had forgotten what it meant to have personal desires and goals. This realization was both terrifying and liberating. If I did not know what I wanted beyond my marriage, how could I possibly be a complete partner in that marriage? Over the next few weeks, a plan began to form in my mind. Instead of continuing to pour all my energy into winning back a woman who had admitted to manipulating me, I would redirect that energy toward rediscovering myself. This was not about revenge or spite, but simple self-preservation. I had given Amanda the power to determine my worth, and I needed to reclaim that power. I started with small changes. I joined a gym near my office and began going every morning before work. The first few weeks were brutal, my body protesting years of neglect, but gradually it became a sanctuary where I could focus solely on my physical well-being. I reconnected with Daniel and other friends I had distanced myself from, accepting their invitations to social events. I would have previously declined to stay home in case Amanda wanted my company. Perhaps most significantly, I enrolled in a night photography class at the local community college. Photography had been a passion of mine in college, something Amanda had always dismissed as a cute hobby. The feel of a camera in my hands again awakened something I had forgotten, a sense of seeing the world through my own eyes rather than through the lens of someone else's approval. Amanda's reaction to these changes was revealing. At first, she barely seemed to notice, as if my presence in the house had become so background that any alteration was beneath her attention. When she did realize I was often out in the evenings at my photography class, her response was dismissive. Photography? Still playing with that old hobby, she said with a smirk. Well, at least it gets you out of the house. As the weeks passed and my changes became more noticeable, her attitude shifted from dismissal to irritation. She complained about the protein shakes in the fridge and the time I spent editing photos on weekends. When I mentioned a hiking trip Daniel had organized, she rolled her eyes and made a comment about midlife crises being so predictable. The financial redirections were perhaps the most difficult but necessary changes. For years, I had funded Amanda's expensive shopping habits without question, wanting to make her happy. I now created separate accounts for my personal growth activities, maintaining our joint account for household expenses, but no longer offering to cover her discretionary spending. The first time she called me, outraged that her credit card had been declined while shopping, I calmly explained that I had redirected some of our disposable income toward my education and health goals. "You spent our money on a camera?" she asked incredulously. "I spent my portion of our disposable income on photography equipment," I corrected her. "Just as you spend yours on clothing and spa days." She hung up on me, but it was the first time in years I did not spend the evening anxious and apologetic trying to win back her approval. Learning to set emotional boundaries was equally challenging. I had to practice saying no, not being constantly available via text or call, and creating healthy space for myself. Dr. Klein helped me understand that boundaries were not walls to keep people out, but structures to define where I ended and others began. As I reclaimed my sense of self, I found myself building relationships with people who valued me. There was Thomas from the gym, who became a regular workout partner and whose straightforward encouragement helped rebuild my confidence. There was Laura, my photography instructor, whose genuine appreciation of my artistic eye reminded me I had worth beyond my role as a husband. And there were the members of a therapy group Dr. Klein had recommended, all navigating their own journeys of self-rediscovery, whose shared experiences helped me feel less alone. The physical transformation was the most visible change. After 6 months of consistent exercise and mindful eating, I had lost the 40 pounds I had gained during my darkest period. My clothes fit better. My energy had improved, and for the first time in years, I felt comfortable in my own skin. Colleagues and friends commented on the change, and their positive reinforcement fueled my continued efforts. At the same time, my skills as a photographer were growing. What had started as a rediscovered hobby became something more, as Laura encouraged me to enter some of my work in a local exhibition. To my surprise, my urban landscape series received positive attention, and a small gallery owner approached me about selling a few pieces. The first time someone purchased one of my photographs, I felt a validation entirely separate from my marriage or Amanda's approval. My social life expanded in ways I had not anticipated. The hiking group Daniel introduced me to became regular weekend companions. There was a camaraderie on the trails that reminded me how much I enjoyed male friendships, the straightforward conversations, and shared accomplishments. I found myself being invited to gallery openings through my photography connections and dinner parties through newly rekindled friendships. Amanda's attitude underwent a fascinating evolution as these changes progressed. Her initial dismissal gave way to confusion, then to increasing interest as she observed the positive attention I was receiving from others. She began asking more questions about my photography, even suggesting we hang one of my pieces in our living room, something she would have scoffed at months earlier. Her behavior toward me shifted subtly. She started coming home earlier, suggesting dinner together, even initiating conversations about topics beyond household management. One evening, she placed her hand on mine during dinner, a casual intimacy that had been absent for so long that it felt jarring rather than natural. "You seem different," she said, studying my face. "Happier." "I am," I replied simply. As my independence grew more established, Amanda entered what I came to think of as the jealousy phase. She began questioning where I was going, who I was with, particularly when it came to my photography classes. Laura, my instructor, became the focus of her suspicion. "So this Laura," she said one evening, her voice casual but her eyes sharp. "Is she single?" "I believe she is," I answered honestly. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious what kind of woman spends so much time mentoring amateur photographers," she replied, the implication clear in her tone. "A professional one," I said, refusing to engage with her insinuation. "She has been teaching for 15 years, and has work displayed in galleries across the country. This exchange was the first of many. Amanda began checking my phone when I was in the shower, questioning my late returns from photography outings, and making increasingly direct accusations about Laura and other women in my expanding social circle. The situation came to a head after a gallery showing where two of my pieces were displayed. Amanda had attended watching with narrowed eyes as Laura introduced me to several established photographers. On the drive home, she was silent until we pulled into our driveway. "I want you to stop with the photography," she said abruptly. "Excuse me." I turned to look at her, certain I had misheard. "This hobby, these people, especially that woman, they are taking you away from us," she said. "If our marriage means anything to you, you will choose me over this selfish new lifestyle." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. 6 months earlier, I would have immediately acquiesced, apologized, promised to do whatever would make her happy. Now I felt a calm clarity. "I'm not going to stop photography, Amanda," I said quietly, "and I'm not going to cut off the friendships I have made. So you are choosing them over me." Her voice rose in disbelief. "I am not choosing between our marriage and my new activities," I explained. "I am choosing to be a complete person, whether you want to be part of my life or not. The question is not whether I choose you, but whether you can accept me as a whole person, rather than just the man who exists to please you." She got out of the car without another word. The next morning, she informed me she would be staying with her sister for a while to think about what she wanted. The implication was clear. She expected me to panic at the thought of separation, to beg her to return to sacrifice my newfound independence on the altar of our marriage. Instead, I helped her pack her bags and called her an Uber to her sister's place. As she left, the look of shock on her face would have been comical if the situation were not so painful. The following weeks were difficult. Despite my newfound independence and self-respect, loneliness visited often. There were moments of doubt when I questioned whether I had made the right choice, whether my personal growth was worth the potential end of my marriage. I continued seeing Dr. Klein, who helped me work through these feelings without surrendering the progress I had made. I focused on building my small photography business, converting our rarely used guest room into a studio space. I accepted more hiking invitations, even traveling to Joshua Tree National Park for a weekend photography expedition. I painted our bedroom, choosing colors I liked, rather than deferring to Amanda's preferences as I always had before. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, almost exactly a month after she had left, Amanda showed up at our doorstep. She was soaking wet mascara streaking down her cheeks, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. "I miss us," she said simply when I opened the door. "I want to try again." I invited Amanda in from the rain, but remained standing, maintaining the physical boundary that symbolized the emotional one I had worked so hard to establish. "I am open to talking," I told her, "but I need to be clear about something first. I will not abandon the person I have become to return to the dynamic we had before." She nodded, water dripping from her hair onto the entryway floor. "I understand that now. I think. I think that is part of why I am here." We moved to the living room where I noticed her taking in the changes. The walls now displayed several of my photographs alongside art we had chosen together years ago. My camera equipment occupied a corner that had once held a decorative table she had selected. The space reflected my presence in a way it had not for years. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, remembering the cup I had prepared the night I overheard her conversation. The night everything had begun to change. When I returned with 2 mugs, Amanda had composed herself somewhat. She took a deep breath and began speaking, her voice steadier than it had been at the door. "I have not been fair to you, Maxwell," she said. "I took you for granted. Worse than that, I think I enjoyed having control over you, over us. It made me feel secure, even as it made me lose respect for both of us." Her honesty surprised me. I had expected defenses, perhaps even attempts to make me feel guilty for asserting my independence. Instead, she spoke with a self-awareness I had not witnessed in years. At my sister's, I had a lot of time to think. She was not exactly sympathetic to my side of things. Amanda continued with a small, rueful smile. She asked me what I truly wanted in a marriage, and I realized I did not know anymore. I just knew that seeing you change, seeing you happy without needing my approval, it woke something up in me. I remembered the man I fell in love with, someone with passion and interests and opinions of his own. We talked for hours that night, more honestly than we had in years. Amanda admitted she had grown comfortable with controlling the relationship, that my constant attempts to please her had created a dynamic where she no longer had to make an effort. She acknowledged, discussing our private issues with friends in ways that were disrespectful. I would like us to try therapy, she suggested as the night grew late. Together this time. I found someone who specializes in rebuilding trust in marriages. I agreed, but with conditions. I would not move backward, only forward. I would continue my photography, my fitness routine, my friendships. Most importantly, I would maintain the financial and emotional boundaries I had established. If we were to have any chance, it would be as equals, not as manipulator and people pleaser. The following weeks were challenging but productive. Our therapist, Dr. Rivera, created a structured environment where we could communicate honestly about needs and expectations. She helped us identify toxic patterns and develop healthier ways to interact. The process was often uncomfortable, requiring both of us to confront our roles in the dysfunction of our marriage. Amanda moved back home after 3 weeks of joint therapy, but into the guest room. Dr. Rivera had suggested we rebuild intimacy, gradually dating each other again rather than assuming the roles of husband and wife would automatically realign. The rebuilding was slow but rewarding. We had weekly date nights where we practiced the communication skills Dr. Rivera had taught us. Amanda came to my next gallery, showing this time genuinely engaging with my work and my photography friends, including Laura, whom she apologized to privately for her previous suspicions. I accompanied Amanda to her company's holiday party, where I met the colleagues she had previously kept separate from our home life. I saw her watching me as I easily conversed with her coworkers, no longer the anxious man desperate for her approval, but someone confident in his own social skills. We discovered that maintaining our individual interests actually strengthened our connection rather than threatening it. Amanda joined a book club she had always been interested in, but had neglected, and I found myself genuinely curious about her discussions and the perspectives she was encountering. She occasionally joined my hiking group, finding unexpected enjoyment in the physical challenge and the camaraderie of the trail. The physical aspect of our relationship rekindled naturally, no longer a source of power struggle, but a genuine expression of rediscovered attraction and emotional connection. The first time we made love after months apart, there was a newness to it, as if we were learning each other again. Over time, we established a new normal, a marriage of equals, where both of us invested in personal growth and shared goals. We learned to support each other's independence while maintaining connection, understanding that true intimacy required two complete individuals choosing each other rather than one person being absorbed into the other's life. 6 months after our reconciliation, Amanda suggested we renew our vows, not with a large ceremony but a private commitment between us on the beach, where I had originally proposed. We wrote new vows that acknowledged our journey and the lessons we had learned. The most profound realization for me was that redirecting my attention to myself was not selfish, as I had initially feared, but necessary. Sometimes saving a relationship means being willing to risk losing it by valuing yourself first. I had been so afraid of being alone that I had allowed myself to be lonely within my marriage, a far more painful state. I now understand that the greatest gift I gave our marriage was finding my worth outside of it. This allowed both of us to choose each other freely, rather than from need or obligation. True love, I learned, is not about sacrifice or control, but about two people growing together while remaining whole as individuals. Have you ever had to redirect your energy away from someone or something that was draining you? Did it end up strengthening the relationship or helping you realize it was time to move on? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life lessons. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to value yourself, even when it feels like the most difficult thing to do.